This video contains flashing lights and colors.
The Dive Coaster. Built by Swiss manufacturer Bolliger & Mabillard, or B&M for short, this attraction model is undoubtedly one of the most popular and sought-after roller coaster designs in the amusement industry. They draw record crowds, receive plenty of engagement on social media, and often rank among the top-rated attractions at any park they run at. Despite this, they aren't immune from criticism, as more seasoned coaster enthusiasts and critics often see them as overrated. Now, with the tallest and fastest dive coaster set to open next year at Six Flags Over Texas, it's the perfect time to discuss how we got from point A to point B. How did the dive coaster get started? How did it evolve over the years? What makes them so popular, and why do more critical guests dislike them in spite of their popularity? Let's take a look at the evolution and duality of the dive coaster right here on Theme Park Crazy. Now let's go back to the 1990s and travel across the Atlantic to England's Alton Towers. At the time, this park was searching for their next world-class thrill ride. After the enormous success of Nemesis in 1994, the park wanted another secret weapon, code for upcoming major attraction, that could match or surpass its impact. Designer John Wardley and B&M teamed up once again, but their first idea wasn't actually a dive coaster at all. Originally, the project that would later become Air, or Galactica as it's now known as, was considered. This would have been the world's first flying coaster by Bolliger & Mabillard, allowing guests to ride in a face-down prone position. However, finding a comfortable way for passengers to ride in this position proved to be a bigger technical challenge than expected, requiring 6 years of research and development. Alton Towers wanted a new major attraction by 1998, so the flying coaster wouldn't be ready in time. So with the clock ticking, Wardley and B&M pivoted to a different world's first attraction, a quote-unquote vertical drop coaster. This model, then known as a dive machine, had reportedly been kicked around since around 1994 according to B&M officials. Alton Towers' need for a new project brought this concept to life. Right off the bat, the big challenge was making it tall enough to be thrilling. This is often a challenge for the park, because noise concerns from local residents prevent Alton Towers from building above the tree line. But just like how they had to dig underground to build Nemesis, they dug underground once again to build this new attraction. Simple in concept but groundbreaking in execution, the ride would plunge guests face first into a massive hole in the ground. Wardley would later remark that compared to Nemesis or Air, Oblivion was dead easy. We just dug a massive hole and put a great big drop in. That didn't mean there were no challenges though, far from it. The tunnel they ended up building was over 100 feet deep. At one point during the dig, it was reported that the tunnel started flooding. This allegedly forced construction crews to use rowboats to continue building. Tunnel aside, the ride was extremely simple. Drop into the tunnel, come back up, take an overbank turn, then ascend into the final brake run. It didn't seem like much on paper, but with the help of some S-tier marketing, intrigue began to build rapidly for the attraction.
Don't look down. Oblivion, the world's first vertical drop roller coaster at Alton Towers.
The marketing campaign for Oblivion was both ambitious and theatrical, and after months of construction, Oblivion opened to the public on March 14, 1998. Though only 65 feet tall above ground, it dropped riders 180 feet into a fog-filled tunnel at nearly 70 miles per hour. The star moment of this ride was absolutely the drop. But instead of simply exiting the lift hill and rolling down the drop, Oblivion did something absolutely genius. At some point in the design process, the decision was made to include a holding brake, which would stop the vehicle on the very edge of the drop. This element added a psychological buildup of fear and excitement, forcing riders to look down even as the ride speakers warned them otherwise. Allowing passengers to stare down at the dark tunnel made the coaster a lot more exciting than its simple layout. There is no doubt that this holding brake would end up defining the coaster and its popularity for years to come. Upon its opening, Oblivion became an instant icon, one that drew massive crowds, endless media coverage, and set the stage for every B&M dive coaster to follow. Yet even still, despite the general praise it received from the public, the coaster did have its critics. In an interview with the media at the time, one guest said, quote, "Nemesis is better. Before elaborating, it's a longer ride, you know?" On review site CaptainCoaster.com, users agree. While Nemesis Reborn sits at number 1 in the park with a 95.6 average score, Oblivion rests at number 5 in the park with a 77.8% score. The general consensus is that the ride is extremely short and does lack elements, but the drop into the tunnel is still incredible. Now here's where things get interesting with this prototype design. Despite marketing the ride as a vertical drop coaster, the drop is actually only 87.5 degrees. This is short of a full vertical decline. This was done in order to keep the wheels from lifting off the track. Now the train wouldn't have flown off or anything, but it would have made for a rough landing at the bottom of the drop. So to make the experience smoother and more comfortable, a steep but not completely vertical drop was used, and thus the wheels stayed on the track the whole time. Interestingly enough, despite Oblivion's success, B&M didn't see a surge in orders for the dive machine. It isn't known why the concept didn't take off right away, but here's a personal theory. Perhaps parks assumed that they had to build some kind of tunnel for the drop, or that the concept only worked with a partially underground layout. If not for the tunnel and the element of mystery in the marketing, this coaster wouldn't be nearly as exciting with such a short, simple layout. Essentially, B&M would have to prove the model could work above ground over the following years. Despite the lack of immediate interest though, one park did take the metaphorical and literal plunge and purchased a mirrored clone of Oblivion. This coaster, named Diving Machine G5, first opened at Taiwan's Jianfusun Fancy World on March 29, 2000. As part of its first drop, it too had an underground tunnel, though not nearly as deep as the one on Oblivion. Aside from very, very slight differences in the stats, the only real difference with this ride and Oblivion is the direction passengers travel. Basically, where Oblivion would turn left, this ride turns right. It wasn't anything groundbreaking, but it was a fun addition to the park, and it continues to operate to this day. It's crazy to think about in hindsight, but the world would have to wait another 5 years to see another dive coaster open to the public. Finally, in 2005, the ride model took a major step forward at Florida's Busch Gardens, Tampa. This coaster in particular is especially nostalgic for me, as I actually rode it when it first debuted in 2005. To be honest, I still find it as nostalgic as a bowl of cereal on Saturday mornings, which brings us to the sponsor of this video, Magic Spoon. With the holidays fast approaching, it's gonna get pretty hectic out here. That's why you need a wholesome, fueling breakfast to start your day. As a kid, there was nothing better than sitting on the couch with a bowl of cereal in the morning. As an adult, I can still enjoy that, but with more protein and much less sugar. Magic Spoon has all the fuel you need, and with ingredients like milk protein and naturally occurring allulose, it's high protein and is perfect for a carb-conscious lifestyle. And Magic Spoon has plenty of flavors to choose from, including a delicious strawberry cheesecake flavor. Magic Spoon is more than just cereal, they've also got these delicious cereal treats too. These bars come in 4 unique flavors of their own,
and have 11 to 12 grams of protein, 1 gram of sugar, and 1 to 2 grams of net carbs.
So when you're on the go, they provide the perfect fuel. Click on the link in the description or use my promo code CRAZY to get Magic Spoon cereal and treats and get $5 off. And you can find Magic Spoon on Amazon or at your nearest grocery store. Magic Spoon is so confident in their product that they have a 100% happiness guarantee online. So if you don't like your product for any reason, they'll refund your money with no questions asked. So while you're heading into the holidays, pick up a box of Magic Spoon today. Special thanks to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this video. About a decade earlier, the original concept of a vertical drop ride was first conceived by the park's Vice President of Design, Mark Rose. Initially, he pitched a 160-foot tall coaster meant to simulate going over Niagara Falls in a barrel. However, other park officials scoffed at this idea, saying it wasn't nearly thrilling enough for a full-scale ride. So he went back to the drawing board. Eventually, he added 40 feet to the drop, the executives approved this, and construction permits were all set and ready. After over a year of building, testing, and $13.5 million spent, the coaster known as ShieKra would make its debut. Named after a small bird of prey found in Africa and Asia, this coaster stands at 200 feet tall. The ride itself had a few major steps forward for the model. First was the introduction of an inversion to the concept. After the first drop, the train swoops upward, goes upside down, and flips right side up in a massive element known as an Immelmann. This would be the signature inversion for this dive coaster, and you will see it come up in future installations. In fact, every B&M dive coaster from ShieKra onwards has an Immelmann. Now why is this? Well, it likely has to do with space. At the bottom of a massive drop and a long lift hill, the most space-efficient way to switch directions is with an Immelmann. This allows the trains to burn off speed and keep the footprint small. Immelmanns are big, efficient, and just plain look cool. It's a classic example of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so Immelmanns are pretty much a dive coaster tradition for B&M. Moreover, this ride featured not one, but 2 vertical drops. Later on in the ride, a smaller vertical drop takes riders into a tunnel. To top it all off, a turnaround after the tunnel led to a thrilling splashdown effect. This splashdown wasn't just an exciting visual to cool off guests in the hot Florida sun though, it was functional. It actually serves to slow down the ride vehicles before they ascend back towards the station. A similar braking system is used on Disneyland's Matterhorn bobsleds. Third, the train's capacity was increased, going from 2 to 3 rows of 8 passengers. This allowed them to carry an impressive 24 people per ride cycle. Capacity would certainly become a positive point for this model. Finally, the last major innovation, also related to the drops, was the use of spring-loaded wheels. Previous installations had drops that stopped just short of 90 degrees due to roughness concerns. But ShieKra was able to hit a full 90 degrees on both of its descents. It did this with a revolutionary spring-loaded wheel system. Basically, springs would push the wheels outwards to stay firmly on the track even during a vertical descent. This ensured a smoother pullout and avoided accelerated wear and tear on the wheel assemblies and track. All in all, ShieKra was a massive hit for the park, and despite being one of the earliest dive coaster models, it still ranks highly. In fact, it currently sits at a 90.3% score on Captain Coaster, the number 3 best rated dive coaster in the world. Funnily enough, the current number 1 on that list would open just 2 years later at Busch Gardens Tampa's sister park, Virginia's Busch Gardens Williamsburg. For this new coaster, Busch Gardens officials wanted to go even bigger and outdo themselves. They ended up adding 5 more feet in height, a second Immelmann, and an extra mile per hour to its speed. The end result? Griffon, the newest, tallest, and fastest dive coaster at the time. Located in the park's France-themed section, this attraction first made its debut on May 18, 2007. At a cost of $15.6 million, it was clearly money well spent because the ride was flat out gorgeous. Its brilliant blue track towered into the sky, and its vibrant yellow and red trains really stood out. Definitely a highly photogenic coaster. As for the layout, it was similar to ShieKra's at first, starting off with that classic 90-degree drop. The train then heads straight down into an Immelmann and then a mid-course brake run. Afterwards, there's a second 90-degree drop, but unlike ShieKra, this course features a second Immelmann. This was actually the first time a dive coaster featured 2 inversions. Afterwards, you get one of the most visually stunning splashdowns out there. If you ever visit this park, you simply must take some photos of this moment. You won't regret it. On top of everything, Griffon introduced floorless trains to the dive coaster model. This style of seating, first used on Medusa and New Jersey's Six Flags Great Adventure, allows guests to sit above the track with their feet dangling. The lack of a floor allows guests to stare down at the drop with nothing blocking the view, and they can't look down at the floor either. Guests are forced to face their fears head-on, or rather, with their best feet forward. Sorry, not sorry. It adds an unobstructed view and an extra sense of danger to the ride experience, though of course it's 100% safe. Guests are able to board through the use of a retractable floor that goes up for loading and unloading, and down for dispatching. The trains themselves were flat out enormous, with 3 rows and 10 across seating. This meant the coaster could carry 30 people per train, ensuring high capacity and throughput. With these trains, as many people as possible could experience the terrifying floorless drop. Not long after Griffon's debut, it was no surprise that these floorless trains were a hit in the industry. Recognizing the need to keep up with the trends, Busch Gardens brought floorless vehicles to Florida and retrofitted them onto ShieKra.
What have we done? ShieKra is now floorless. Can you stand it?
Apparently, they did have the option to choose floorless trains to begin with, but management was hesitant. According to Mark Rose, 2 years ago, we were doing first-of-a-kind things with ShieKra. 200 feet tall, the tallest, 90 degrees, the only one straight down, an Immelman, the first inversion, a second drop, the water brake. We were doing so many things, we didn't know if we wanted to go floorless. But as soon as we were finished and we knew it was so perfect, so wonderful, everybody loved it, could we make it even better? And that's when we started thinking, could we take the floor out? He added that removing the floor ended up being more complicated than simply cutting the old floor out of the old trains. Although the wheel bogies and seats were reused, these new trains used an all-new chassis. This new chassis was heavier in order to make up for the lost weight of the floor being removed. The station was also redesigned to include the retractable floor. Overall, the floorless trains were widely acclaimed upon being added to ShieKra, and to this date, every dive coaster except for Oblivion and Diving Machine G5 have these trains. So what was next for the dive coaster? Well, let's cross the globe again to Chimelong Paradise in Guangzhou, China. On January 21, 2008, the park introduced the simply named Dive Coaster. This ride's layout was almost identical to ShieKra's, but it was slightly shorter, not quite as fast, and just a little bit longer. The biggest differences from ShieKra were the second drop not being completely vertical and the ride's ending. Instead of a downward bank turn like on ShieKra, Dive Coaster has more of an upward helix. Some critics say this is something the coaster has over ShieKra. They add that the track's closeness to the vegetation adds intensity and a good sense of speed. As of right now, this coaster is rumored to be closing soon due to rides in China legally having expiration dates. Basically, the law says you either have to purchase new trains and retrack the coaster or close it down. Supposedly, officials opted to repurpose the land for apartments, but that's another story entirely. The next year, on August 16, 2009, China would get another one of these coasters. That day, the ride named Diving Coaster would make its debut at Happy Valley in Shanghai. Slightly different stats aside, this was literally the same coaster as ShieKra. Same drops, same Immelman, same overall layout, and when it first opened, even the exact same color scheme. It's like a portal to China suddenly opened up in Florida. In recent years, they have since repainted this ride so it's not the exact same color as ShieKra. Other than that though, there's really not much else to say about it. Soon enough, the dive coaster would make its return to Europe. Merlin Entertainment, owners of Alton Towers, expressed interest in ordering another dive coaster from B&M. This time though, it would be headed to Germany's Heide Park for the 2011 season. This coaster named Krake would have a pirate theme. Not only that, but there would be a monstrous octopus incorporated into the theming. Now, although this coaster has since become famous for its incredible octopus mouth tunnel, here's an interesting fact. The original adverts for this coaster prominently featured a dive into the octopus's mouth. This unsettling ad was flat out genius.
Krake, Deutschlands erster Dive Coaster.
But guests on opening day were disappointed to see no such tunnel. Instead, the octopus mouth would be located next to the bottom of the drop. This was seen as a bait and switch by some. As exciting as the splashdown looked, the park was heavily criticized for not following through with what they advertised. So for the 2012 season, the signature tunnel was built, and it continues thrilling guests today. As for the ride itself, it introduced a new style of trains as well. Though they still had rows of 3, the number of seats per row was reduced to 6. With smaller trains, the track was also made more narrow. This smaller track allows for greater affordability with less steel required. It also allows for tighter turns and transitions and more options for the elements. It's especially helpful for fitting a coaster in a small footprint. Krake is certainly the optimal example of this. It is only about half as long as ShieKra, but it does manage to fit in an Immelmann and a splash effect. For these reasons, Krake is often referred to as a mini dive, and more specifically, a narrow type of dive coaster. Meanwhile, previous iterations like ShieKra and Griffon are classified as wide due to their larger tracks. Now, believe it or not, Krake was actually a bit of a disappointment when it first debuted. Annual attendance was initially reported as stagnant, staying at 1.35 million between 2010 and 2011. And even with revised numbers, attendance only grew to 1.4 million. Then in 2012, attendance dropped to 1.3 million, despite having a relatively new ride. Furthermore, another model by B&M had started to catch on in the industry. This design, named a wing coaster, made its debut the same year as Krake in 2011 at Italy's Gardaland. The coaster named Raptor was widely praised, and in 2012, the model exploded in popularity, with 3 installations in that year alone. For a while, it seemed like parks were expressing more interest in the wing coaster than the dive coaster, and the underperformance of Krake may have turned off potential buyers. It wouldn't be for another 4 years that another dive coaster opened. Surprisingly enough, Merlin Entertainment decided to dip their toes into the model once again. This coaster, uncoincidentally enough, was named Oblivion, the Black Hole. This combined the names of Alton Towers Oblivion and the now-defunct indoor coaster Black Hole at the same park.
Mission Oblivion 3, 2, 1.
Cerchiamo nuove reclute per sfidare le montagne russe a caduta in picchiata verticale. Oblivion, the Black Hole, a Gardaland.
Oblivion the Black Hole would be fairly different from its predecessor. For one thing, it was another narrow model. Also, it had 2 inversions. Of course, it had the classic Immelmann, but it also contained a Heartline roll. This made it the first dive coaster to have an inversion that wasn't an Immelmann. Overall, it was another solid addition in B&M's dive coaster resume, and the same year, the company would build one of the most visually stunning creations ever. B&M's next dive coaster would emerge at one of Europe's most stunning theme parks, Efteling in the Netherlands. On July 1st, 2015, the park debuted Baron 1898, a dive coaster that may be small in stature, but absolutely massive in atmosphere. With a drop of just 123 feet tall, Baron 1898 remains the shortest B&M dive coaster ever built. But what it lacks in height, it more than makes up for in theming. The attraction is themed to a cursed gold mine haunted by ghostly spirits who watch over said gold. Before riders even reach the lift hill, they pass through a brief dark ride section that takes them deep inside the mining facility. Elaborate set design, special lighting effects, and an awesome orchestral soundtrack establish the haunting backstory and build anticipation for the drop. Once at the top, riders plunge straight down into a fog-filled tunnel. The entire lift and drop are surrounded by a stunning mock steel mining tower, built in Budapest specifically for the ride. The result is one of the most striking coasters you'll ever see. Baron 1898 also marked another major first for the model. It was the first dive coaster to feature a zero-G roll. This twisting inversion gives riders a weightless sensation as they glide through the air. Despite its compact layout, the coaster delivers a complete experience, thrills, immersion, and narrative, and is often praised as the best themed B&M coaster ever. Baron 1898's success proved that the dive coaster still had plenty of potential, and it wasn't long before B&M returned to the United States to take the model to new heights, literally. The next chapter would unfold at Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio, a park known for breaking records and redefining thrill rides. In 2016, Cedar Point unveiled Valravn, a towering steel beast that would once again push the limits of what a dive coaster could be. Standing at a staggering 223 feet tall, Valravn became the tallest dive coaster in the world upon opening. The signature 90-degree plunge is 214 feet tall, with riders reaching a top speed of 75 miles per hour. And the coaster was more than its drop. With a layout featuring an Immelmann, a dive loop, and a zero-G roll, Valravn became the first dive coaster to feature 3 inversions. It was also the first ever to include a dive loop, which is basically an Immelmann in reverse. These additions helped round out the ride experience, giving it more variety than any dive coaster before it. It's worth noting that Valravn is also a wide model. Cedar Point is no weenie hut restaurant. It is one of the biggest amusement parks in the world, so of course they would want to go big with this coaster. The extra capacity of 8 per row seating definitely helps in a high crowd setting, and high crowds it got. The public response was overwhelming. In Valravn's debut season, Cedar Point drew over 3.6 million visitors. This marked the park's highest attendance since the debut of Raptor back in 1994. Yes, no other coaster edition between 1994 and 2016 drew the numbers Valravn would. Valravn's imposing structure and highly visible location on the park's midway made it an instant icon. Plus, here's a fun fact. If you look at the track a certain way, it kind of looks like it spells the word Ohio. Yes, it's a bit of a stretch, but it's still a fun little coincidence. However, not everything about Valravn was universally praised, because it was in fact the first dive coaster to feature B&M's vest restraints. This system would go on to be derided by enthusiasts for years to come. These restraints, adapted from B&M's flying coaster design and previously utilized on their wing coasters, replaced the older over-the-shoulder harnesses. In theory, they were meant to improve comfort and reduce headbanging, a common complaint of rides with over-the-shoulder restraints. These new harnesses consist of a pull-down lap bar attached to a flexible vest that fits snugly across the chest. No bulky restraints are on the sides of the passengers, allowing for an unobstructed view in each seat. But while they do have their benefits, many riders found them restrictive. Some complained that the vest would tighten throughout the ride, limiting upper body movement and reducing airtime. The final brake run is said to be especially uncomfortable, as passengers wait while wearing the tightened vests. Others criticized the lap bar as thigh-crushing, especially during the holding brake moments before the drop and the final brake run. While the new system succeeded in eliminating headbanging, it arguably introduced new discomforts, making these restraints one of the most controversial elements in B&M's design history. Indeed, they were a contentious point in riders' love-hate dive coaster dynamic. Still, despite concerns with the restraints, Valravn's success was undeniable. It cemented the dive coaster's place in modern amusement park lineups, and marked the start of a new wave of installations around the world. That wave continued in 2018 with a whopping 3 new dive coasters. Following Valravn's debut, the next dive coaster would take us back to China, this time to Happy Valley in Sichuan. In 2018, the park opened Flying Apsaras, a narrow dive coaster themed after the Apsaras, which are celestial beings from Hindu and Buddhist mythology. Unlike Valravn's record-breaking ambitions, Flying Apsaras returned to the classic dive coaster formula, featuring a main vertical drop and a single Immelmann. It didn't reinvent the model, but it was still a welcome addition to the park's lineup, and there's no doubt that locals had never ridden anything like it before. Interestingly enough, Flying Apsaras also used B&M's original over-the-shoulder restraints rather than the newer Best-style harnesses. This suggests that even after Valravn introduced a new system, the traditional restraint option remained available for parks that preferred it. Or perhaps the original restraints were simply more cost-efficient. That same year, the dive coaster would make its debut in South Korea. Located at Gyeongju World, Draken brought the country a B&M coaster. And although it didn't break new ground, it certainly delivered proven thrills. Draken is, for all intents and purposes, a clone of Griffon at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, featuring the same general layout. It had 2 vertical drops, 2 Immelmanns, and a splashdown. However, there is one subtle but noticeable difference. Draken's trains seat 8 riders across instead of 10. This is again thought to be another cost-related decision. What makes Draken particularly significant in the dive coaster's evolution was that it was the last coaster of its kind to feature B&M's original over-the-shoulder restraints. Every dive coaster built after this point would use the newer vest-style harness system. It's unclear whether the classic restraint style remains an available option today, but as of now, Draken marks the end of that era for the dive coaster lineup. That same year, on August 10, 2018, the dive coaster model expanded once again, this time at Liseberget, Göteborg, Sweden. The park unveiled Valkyria, a new narrow dive coaster model named after the Valkyries of Norse mythology. Valkyria stands as one of the most refined and complete examples of the narrow track design. Its layout includes an Immelmann, a zero-G roll, and a Heartland roll, a good mix of elements. With a gorgeously themed station, an underground tunnel, and a layout that soars above the park's landscape, Valkyria is one of the most celebrated dive coasters ever built. It has also received widespread acclaim for its butter-smooth ride. Currently, Valkyria ranks as the number 4 dive coaster in the world on Captain Coaster, sitting just behind ShieKra. All of this in spite of the fact that it does feature vest restraints. Though there's still a point of contention, Valkyria receives high marks. At this point, the vest restraints had officially become the standard for all new dive coasters. The next major leap for the model came just a year later at Canada's Wonderland. On May 3, 2019, the park opened Yukon Striker, the star attraction of the newly completed Frontier Canada section. This area of the park is a long-envisioned expansion themed around the Klondike Gold Rush of the 1890s. So how about that, another dive coaster themed to the 1890s? Yukon Striker was another wide-track dive coaster. This signaled that Canada's Wonderland wanted to go all out for this record-breaking project. Standing at 223 feet tall, it tied Valravn's structural height record, but it had a longer 245-foot drop. This was done thanks to a dramatic underwater tunnel that plunges riders beneath a pond shared with a suspended coaster vortex. The latter coaster gracefully wraps around the tunnel entrance. The result is one of the most visually astonishing interactions between two coasters anywhere in the world. It really is like something out of Planet Coaster. Like Valravn, Yukon Striker also featured 4 inversions. The layout features an Immelmann, a zero-G winder, a vertical loop, and a second Immelmann to close out the circuit. That vertical loop, in particular, was a first for the model and added a new experience for the dive coaster formula.
And here's a fun fact about this coaster. It actually has a moving storage system to prevent theft. Pretty cool.
The layout as a whole was a prime example of how dive coasters worked in compact spaces. Just look at the space they were able to fit it in. Despite the continued use of vest restraints, Yukon Striker was widely praised for its exceptional smoothness and varied layout. Though some critics voiced the familiar complaint that the ride felt too short, most agreed that it was one of the best executed dive coasters to date. On Captain Coaster, it currently ranks as the second highest dive coaster in the world, boasting an impressive 91% score. One thing worth noting is that despite adding more and more elements, a lot of these dive coasters are still criticized as too short according to ratings on Captain Coaster. This is likely due to the fact that the dive takes center stage, and the elements, while interesting, aren't quite as intense as they are on other coasters like in RMC. Now, enthusiasts love intensity, so this is a point of contention as well. Back to the model's evolution, the pandemic naturally led to a few down years in the coaster market. Some rides originally set for 2020 were pushed to 2021 or 2022. In the latter year, the dive coaster model would make its long-awaited debut on the US West Coast. On March 12, 2022, SeaWorld San Diego unveiled Emperor, the park's first major coaster in years and the first B&M dive coaster ever built west of the Rocky Mountains. Emperor is a narrow model design that stands at 153 feet tall. The 90-degree drop is 143 feet. The smaller height is reportedly limited by San Diego's strict height regulations that cap the park's attractions at 153 feet. Though shorter than the record breakers that came before it, Emperor still offered the classic dive coaster experience packed into a compact footprint. The layout includes 3 inversions, an Immelmann, a barrel roll, and a corkscrew, making Emperor the first ever dive coaster to include said corkscrew. Being at SeaWorld, Emperor takes its name from the Emperor Penguin, but the final attraction actually ended up being light on Antarctic theming. This drew criticism from guests expecting a more immersive presentation. Additionally, many enthusiasts have noted that the ride has a noticeable rattle. A rattle is a vibration that can be felt throughout the course. This rattle is said to be especially present on the edge seats, while the center seats tend to provide a smoother experience. On dive coasters and other wide-train B&Ms like wing coasters, the outer seats are positioned farther from the train's center line. When the train navigates curves, transitions, or rolls, the forces acting on those outer seats are magnified due to leverage. Similar to how the end of a seesaw travels farther than the middle. This means any small vibration or flex in the wheel assembly, chassis, or track joints is more dramatically felt the farther you are from the center. Despite those perceived flaws, Emperor still represented a milestone. It was a geographic first, and it was a solid, compact dive coaster that brought the model to a new audience. Later that same year, the dive coaster would make its long-awaited debut at a Six Flags park. On July 30th, 2022, Six Flags Fiesta Texas introduced Dr. Diabolical's Cliffhanger, a major milestone for both the park and for B&M. This attraction marked the first B&M coaster built for a Six Flags park since X-Flight in 2012. Once again, the narrow track was chosen. However, this time, the manufacturer introduced a completely new 7-across seating configuration, the first ever on a dive coaster. This adjustment was likely made to add more passengers and increase capacity. Though Cliffhanger could have been a standard dive coaster, it pushed the boundaries in a more literal way. It actually became the first B&M dive coaster to feature a beyond vertical drop. More specifically, riders were plunged down a 95-degree descent, 5 degrees steeper than the standard. The ride course features 2 inversions, an Immelmann and a 0G roll variant that's slightly modified from the standard version found on other B&M layouts. According to RCDB, this element begins similarly but ends differently, and its final name hasn't been decided. But you know what, because I'm chaotic, I'm just going to label it a sushi roll and call it a day. According to Captain Coaster, while some passengers reported a rattle, most say the ride is incredibly smooth. Plus, most agree that the extra 5 degrees on the drop really do make a difference, adding a surprising jolt of intensity that sets this coaster apart from its predecessors. Dr. Diabolical's Cliffhanger proved that even after more than 2 decades of evolution, B&M's dive coaster model was still capable of innovation. In 2024, the dive coaster would be installed yet again, this time at Pennsylvania's Dorney Park. On May 10, 2024, the park unveiled Iron Menace, its first major roller coaster since 2012, when the relocated Stinger briefly operated before its removal. Even more notably, this was Dorney's first ground-up coaster project since Hydra the Revenge in 2005. This marked a long-overdue addition to the park's lineup according to fans, and people were excited. Standing tall with a 95-degree beyond vertical drop, Iron Menace became the second dive coaster to feature an extra steep descent. The ride's layout features 4 inversions, an Immelmann, a 0G roll, an incline loop, and a corkscrew. That incline loop is the first one ever built on a dive coaster, once again showing the interest to mix up the formula. Unfortunately, while the ride sounded good on paper, it hasn't earned much praise from the coaster community. Many enthusiasts have criticized it for its noticeable rattle, saying it was uncomfortable and obvious. Others have pointed out the ride's short layout, a common criticism of dive coasters in general, but especially pronounced here due to the compact pacing. As a result, Iron Menace currently sits at the bottom of the dive coaster rankings on Captain Coaster, holding a 69.8% score, the lowest of any dive coaster to date. Even so, Iron Menace serves as an important milestone for Dorney Park, and it proves that the interest in dive coasters can extend to smaller regional parks. B&M would push the limits of the dive coaster yet again, this time at Illinois' Six Flags Great America. That year, the park debuted Wrath of Rakshasa, named after the Rakshasa, a type of demon that appears across multiple mythologies. This ride took the dive coaster model into uncharted territory. It became the steepest B&M dive coaster ever built, with an unprecedented 96-degree drop, just 1 degree steeper than Dr. Diabolical's Cliffhanger. It also broke a major record for the model, featuring a total of 5 inversions, the most on any B&M dive coaster. These elements are an Immelmann, a dive loop, a 0G roll, a corkscrew, and a barrel roll finale. This gives the layout more meat than any of its predecessors. Upon opening, Wrath of Rakshasa was praised for its intense drop and creative use of inversions. Riders appreciated the variety of motion and pacing that kept the experience fresh from start to finish. However, the coaster wasn't without controversy. Once again, its rattle received an unwanted reputation. Once again, people said that the outer seats were much worse than the center seats. Many enthusiasts expressed irritation that an otherwise innovative design was spoiled by a rattle. Some even lamented that Batman the Ride, the park's iconic inverted coaster from 1992, ran smoother than this brand new attraction. Still, Wrath of Rakshasa plainly demonstrated that more than 25 years after Oblivion, B&M continues to evolve the concept. Over the years, steeper drops, more inversions, and increasingly ambitious layouts have been added to the model. And now, the next chapter of the dive coaster story is about to begin. In 2026, Tormenta Rampaging Run will open at Six Flags Over Texas. This will mark the next major evolution of the model. This ride will shatter records as the first dive coaster to reach 300 feet tall. It will feature a breathtaking 285-foot beyond vertical 95-degree drop, the tallest ever built for this model. The structural height of at least 300 feet officially classifies it as a giga coaster, as either the structural height or drop height can qualify a ride as such. Tormenta will have 5 inversions, 3 Immelmans, a vertical loop, and a cutback, which will be the first cutback on any dive coaster. Not to mention, the vertical loop will be 170 feet tall, making it the tallest vertical loop ever built. For the first time since Yukon Striker, this ride will use the wide track design. Tormenta will also be the first major full-circuit coaster to open at Six Flags Over Texas since the new Texas Giant. This marks a massive step forward for the park. Naturally, anticipation is sky high. Both enthusiasts and the general public have expressed excitement. People from across the globe have expressed interest in Tormenta's record-breaking stats and imposing presence. But as always, you can't please everyone. Even before construction has completed, some more critical coaster enthusiasts have already written it off as the worst giga. Some have doubled down on their criticism of dive coasters as one-trick ponies. This criticism has been kicked around for years. Critics say the dive coaster focuses too much on the first drop. They say that despite being tall, dramatic, and photogenic, the ride lacks in sustained thrills. Many also dismiss the signature Immelman inversions as forceless and cliché, while others complain about the vest restraints. Like we discussed earlier, enthusiasts greatly disapprove of the reduction of airtime and say the restraints feel more restrictive. To them, dive coasters are flashy but shallow. They're tall, they're fast, but they're a model that values appearance over substance. The thing about most coaster enthusiasts is that they prefer long rides with a variety of elements and a lot of airtime and intensity. With dive coasters, the inversions tend to be large and sweeping, offering a more graceful experience than, say, the whippy transitions on an RMC hybrid coaster. Some have expressed frustration that Six Flags Over Texas chose to build a Giga dive coaster instead of a standard Giga coaster that would have more airtime and intensity. And of course, in recent years, critics have argued that B&M's quality has gone downhill. Some of their other recent coasters, like Phoenix Rising at Busch Gardens Tampa or Rapterra at Virginia's King's Dominion, have also been criticized for having a rattle. And although Dr. Diabolical's cliffhanger is said to be smooth, critics have pointed the finger at Emperor, Wrath of Rakshasa, and Iron Menace as proof of B&M's alleged decline. Many critics have engaged in a debate over what has caused these recent rattles. Theories range from pandemic-related cost-cutting and lower-quality steel, to harder polyurethane wheels that last longer but transfer more vibration, to the idea that increasing height and speed inherently causes more stress on the trains. Others even suggest the vest restraints press riders more firmly into their seats, making vibrations more noticeable. Of course, all of these theories are unverified, and similar claims have popped up before. People previously said B&M was going downhill back in 2006 on the Coaster Buzz message boards, and again in 2014 with the opening of Banshee at Ohio's Kings Island. At this point, my head's spinning from all the speculation, so I'm going to take a break and grab myself a bowl of pho.
2 hours later.
But all jokes aside, despite the ongoing criticism, dive coasters remain one of the most popular and marketable attractions in the world. They draw huge crowds, deliver unforgettable visuals, and offer a sense of scale few other rides can match. The truth is that most park guests don't care about wheel compounds, restraint geometry, or how many times an immelman can be used. They care about the feeling. The slow climb to the top, the agonizing pause over the edge, the drop from such a high height, the steepness of it all of this really sells the experience. To put it simply, when you combine the holding brake with the first drop and the floorless trains, it's much easier to market the ride as scary to thrill seekers who don't study every coaster on Earth for the most airtime or the highest G-forces. These rides are visually striking, efficient to operate, and high capacity. From a business standpoint, they're an easy win. They draw attention, they look epic, and they deliver a clear, marketable thrill. Whether you love them or you think they've gone stale, there's no denying that dive coasters have their place in the roller coaster extended universe. And here's an interesting fact. Valravn at Cedar Point is actually the second most ridden coaster in the park, and it's a close second only behind Gatekeeper, which is literally at the front gate. That alone says a lot. And that's the duality of the dive coaster. Some people love them for their fear factor, and others see them as overrated. But no matter where you stand, one thing is certain. The dive coaster has left a massive mark on the amusement industry, and its story is far from over. Now it's time for the comment shoutout program. This is where I take 5 random comments from my previous video and read them out. These comments come from my video on the Cat in the Hat Dark Ride. Party Red VR says, wait, John and Jane Doe? Does this mean Forsaken was based off the Cat in the Hat? The Eerie Master says, I think depending on how well the upcoming Cat in the Hat movie does, they should give the ride a complete makeover. Modern, high-quality animatronics and effects would go a long, long way for this ride. Dirty Al 37 says, does anyone here see Spamton Neo's Idol? Please tell me I'm not going insane. Lenny 8959 says, you summarized the book as if you were a prosecution lawyer. And Hypersonic 9394 says, if you told me this attraction was a Halloween Horror Nights ride, I would believe you, LOL.
Thank you all so much, and if you want to support me on Patreon, you can do so once again at the link in the description.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on social media on Instagram and Facebook, or you can check out my website at themeparkcrazy.com.
And I'm on TikTok.
This is Theme Park Crazy, and I'll see you all next time.